Hey, Sarah.
Hey,
So,
congratulations.
thank you. I am officially 13 years sober. I got sober on January 2nd, 2010. And what that means to me is that I show up for life. I show up for myself. I show up for my friends. I show up for my family in a way that is present, that is genuine, that is me without any alcohol or mind altering substances. Other than caffeine and sugar, I like to say, 'cause they
I
have
was totally just going to ask that. I'm like, but come on, girl. I know you like your coffees.
love my coffee.
I love how you said that it helps you to be more you. And that's like, we were friends before you were sober, and I'm so grateful that we're friends now as well. And that for me has been the most beautiful thing to see is just I saw the change right away. But it just keeps getting deeper and bigger, and it's beautiful to see. Yeah, I'm gonna cry a lot in this
Yes,
conversation.
you are. What's so fascinating about that line to me is I think that I always believed alcohol brought me to my truer self. Like the feeling that alcohol gave me was that I could be me, like that I could show up as me, that I could like not be scared to exist essentially. And that's the baffling and cunning part of alcohol and alcoholism for me. And I think, in our private conversations, we make this distinction. I think it's really important to make publicly as well, is that there are plenty of people that can drink normally. We are, as a company, we're not against alcohol, but as a personal experience, alcohol and me don't jive well. I don't know moderation. I don't know how to stop no matter what the consequences are. And it has this effect of, I think I know everything. So I think I'm in my genuine self. I think that I have control over everything. I think that I'm drinking or doing on purpose exactly what I want or wanted, past tense, when essentially it was so far removed from who I really was.
I think that's really interesting because I've been thinking a lot about a conversation or a question that you asked me a couple of weeks ago, which is why did we become friends? And like what did like and you phrased it very kindly because you're like, what did you see in me? But I'm like, dude, I was a fucking mess in my 20s too. So like let's have that be mutual. What did we see in each other, first of all?
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it and I was like, you weren't wrong. That alcohol allowed you the courage to bring a part of yourself into fruition because I felt like I got to see a really real and genuine part of yourself. But and then just because we're soulmates, so like we were able to bring that into your sober life too. So I never realized that it was something that only came forward when you were drinking, because in our relationship, that wasn't the case. Like I saw your light and I saw your courage and your beauty and your intelligence on a daily basis. But I was thinking about that and I was like, I think that I saw that glimpse because alcohol does, in a way, breaks down our inhibitions. So it's not the sustainable path to show your true self, but it's a way to get glimpses of it. And I think I saw those.
Oh, now I'm going to cry. And for some context to the listeners, we met at a beans and beer party. That was the title of it, which was chili and beer. And I had just found out about a very significant loss in my life and a very traumatic loss. And as a 24-year-old, not knowing how to cope with that and being in a new city with a new roommate, our solution was to throw a party. And Sarah came to that party and walked through the door, and we've been inseparable ever since. Mostly, we had our separate moments. And one of the things that is really important in this friendship to me is Sarah's actually one of the reasons I'm probably sober today, because Sarah had the courage to end our friendship. Sarah had the courage to, at the end of my drinking. So at the beginning, she saw my light. She saw this essence of me. But alcoholism is progressive disease. And my alcoholism progressed really fast, really fast. And in that progression, just like I couldn't control what a night was going to be like of how much I drank, I couldn't control what emotions were going to come out. And I was a roller coaster. I was a shit show to be around. And it was either a really fun night, but fun could also bring chaos and danger and consequences. So I want to be careful with that, because like it was fun. It was exhilarating. We had some really great nights, and we also we dodged some bullets that we're just lucky for. And Sarah, my companion in so much of this, was a normal 20-something-year-old drinking. So like, we have these experiences where someone is like, it looks on the outside like we were experiencing the same thing, and yet it was so far apart. So as my disease progressed and her drinking didn't change, like Sarah's drinking didn't change, and I became unpredictable. Sarah had the courage to say, I can't do this anymore, and set a really hard boundary. Now, we did everything together in DC, everything. Like, we were not known to be apart.
Really called S squared.
Yeah.
That was our nickname. It was a combined nickname.
Like where one of us was, the other, like, it was just noted. If you were invited to something, I came along. If I was invited, you came along. Like, everyone knew this. And so to have this crucial moment and I remember the sincerity in it. Do you remember the walk?
Like, no. And that's why I find it so fascinating. I'm like, I barely remember this. I remember being like, this isn't working for me. I need to end this relationship. Like, this is so hard. How do you even, I like remember going through it, but I don't remember, the conversation.
We were walking from the poorhouse on a bocce night. And so bocce ball was our sport of choice. And it really was a drinking.
Pickleball. It's like pickleball now.
Yeah. And it was like a drinking marathon on a Thursday night. Or was it Wednesday night? Thursday night. It was Thursday. And I had started a new job. And I had gotten this job that I had worked really hard for and spent a lot of time trying to get into military mental health care. And I finally got there. And I knew at that time I couldn't drink like I had been drinking. I couldn't call out sick. I couldn't like have that same, no, if I should have had that mentality with the other job too. It was a great job. I don't want to displace that in any way. But it was this awakening that this has progressed and I don't have control and I need to have control. So I went home early one night with Sarah instead of closing down the bar, because Sarah closed down the bar sometimes, but not always, because she was functional. And so on that walk to the metro, you told me that you couldn't be in this friendship anymore, that I was too all over the place, and that you couldn't handle me. But that's what I heard. I heard, to be very clear, I heard, I can't handle you anymore. You're too much. And I know that is not what you said, but I do know that it was a version of that. And I remember feeling very kicked when I was down. Like, why does these things always happen to me? I can't help if my life is so dramatic. I can't help if all of these things are happening. And I didn't take it well. I didn't take it well at all.
Well, yeah. I think that would be really hard to take well.
Yeah.
And especially, right? If we had that conversation after the poorhouse, I had been drinking too. I'm sure I didn't say it as compassionately if we had had the conversation soberly.
Yeah.
And it also probably is why we had the conversation, because again, right? Like, we were feeling our feelings. Like, I think for me, like, I grew up in a very repressed, my family did not say I love you. We didn't hug. We didn't do a lot of that stuff. So for me in college in the 20s, like, I also didn't drink until I graduated high school. So when I first went and I started to experience what I noticed to be a little bit of freedom, especially in my 20s, it was very nice to be able to like feel the freedom to feel my feelings. That was a lot of F's all in one sentence. But like, especially back then when we were having those conversations, like, I didn't have the skills that I have now, like that was when I was working a job that was very much not my passion. We both were. And like, if we had had that conversation now, I hope I would have done that in a more caring way. Sober. I hope I would have done it sober.
I don't think you're gonna like, I mean, and that's what brings us to now is we don't have those conversations today because it's not, we don't let our relationship get to that point of breaking. And we've had some hard points in our relationship in my sober path of, are we going to make this or not? Or what kind of work do we need to do? Or how do we need to tweak this? And I think the difference in that is, yes, age, time, our own journeys of recovery from all of our stuff, right? Like no one in this world makes it to 30 without experiencing something, and definitely doesn't make it to 40 without like having some stuff. Like there's stuff. And it's how we navigate that. When you use the word freedom, to me, that's so interesting because alcohol gave me freedom. Like it was the same feeling. So our initial feeling, and this is what's so fascinating about also the disease of alcoholism to me, is we both didn't start drinking till after high school. We both found the same freedom, maybe slightly different way. For me, it was, I was such a wallflower. I was so shy. I was so timid and scared in high school that I didn't want to be that person anymore. And alcohol gave me that ability to be like, oh, okay, I can dance, I can be me, I can be free. And that's the feeling it felt. It felt like a deep breath and like I could be free. And that was great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. And like it's something we talk about a lot. I've been thinking a lot about this also. I used to consider myself a Buddhist, and something that we talk a lot about in Buddhism is there comes a point in your spiritual development when the path that you are on is no longer going to get you the results. And of course, in Buddhism, it's not, for the record, people watching this, I am not a Buddhist because I'm enlightened, right? But like their whole point is there comes a point when you need to let go of the Buddhist path in order to reach your next step. And I think with alcohol and drugs, substances in general, many people can have the same experience. Like for me, that was the first time that I felt certain feelings was when I was drinking, and drinking gave me the ability to tap into them. But now I don't need alcohol. You know, I mean, if I drink now once a week, that's a lot for me. But do I still feel my feelings every day? Every day.
Every damn day.
So that for me, I think is interesting too, is just like how what used to serve us isn't going to serve us for forever. And hopefully it won't, hopefully we'll evolve. And like that's what I've seen with you. It's just like that beautiful evolution of.
Oh, thank you. And what, it's also another funny one is that I think that I drank to not feel my feelings.
I think that's more common.
Yeah, like I had a lot of feelings and I had a lot of things, and it was exhausting. Like honestly, I mean, from a young age, I remember being anxious and scared, and with good reason. I mean, I have my trauma history, like there is good reason for it, but I lived life and I always like to make this very clear too. I had a really great upbringing. I had trauma and I had really incredible parents and community and love and all of these things. And I struggled with what could probably now be seen as it was diagnosable anxiety, fear, depression, mood swings, like it was a lot to handle, having not knowing how to navigate the world in a way that felt safe was a lot, because to feel safe took a lot of energy. And that doesn't mean I wasn't safe. It means to feel safe. It took a lot of energy, and alcohol took that away. I got to rest. I got to like breathe. And that was a big part of it. Really was. And it stopped working. Like it stopped working.
Stop working.
There was no amount I could drink anymore. My drinking evolved from party, really like get outside myself, be fun. Again, some really bad negative consequences in that fun that I didn't see as negative consequences. I saw as a result of drinking, and they were worth it. Everyone has shit happen. Mine happened because I was drunk. Duh, whatever, move past it. But then it went to pain support when I lost someone I loved. It went to emotional support and survival. I actually think in some ways I am alive because I had alcohol, because it numbed me enough to get to the next day. And then none of that worked. None of it worked. And I couldn't control it. And I think what was really interesting is a lot of people think of alcoholism as you've lost your job, you have a DUI, you're homeless, you don't have friends anymore. Like on the outside, my life looked really good. I had a great apartment. I think hands down, probably the best apartment I've ever had. It was such a great little apartment.
Oh, it's such a yeah.
Like I had a on paper great job. It wasn't bringing a lot of joy, but on paper, a great job. I was in a relationship, again, not the healthy relationship, but I was in a relationship. I had a ton of friends. I looked like I was having fun a lot of the time. It would not, and this is a big one for people. I could go out to dinner and have one glass of wine. I could go to dinner, have a glass of wine, and go home. And so many of us think of alcoholism as you can't stop drinking. So what it was for me was Russian roulette. I could sometimes have a glass of wine and go home, but sometimes I couldn't. And I could no longer, like in the middle of my drinking, I was able to really control that. By the end, I couldn't control which it was going to be. It was like, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to go out with the intention of having one glass with dinner or two glasses with dinner and go home. And sometimes that would happen. And a lot of times it wouldn't. And that's for me, the biggest shift is there was this point where I couldn't predict it anymore.
I remember that was the most confusing thing to me was when you said that you were going to stop drinking. And I was like, cool, that's great. I was like, okay, great. Yes. But then I was like, but why? You know, like, and here's the thing, you had always talked about quitting drinking once you had kids. This was like a non-negotiable with you. And I was always like, that is very cool and very, why so black and white? But I was like, cool is clearly a boundary with her. So I'm just gonna like, and now in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, I understand now. But like at the time, I remember being like, but we drink pretty similar. I'm like, yeah, you drink twice as fast as me, but most people do. You only drink twice as fast. You know what I mean? And I was like, and so many times we just go out and we have one drink and we stop. And like that for me was like the biggest disconnect because I didn't understand that. And like, yeah.
We went to Jamaica with an all-inclusive bar, and I don't think we got drunk one time there.
No.
One, it didn't feel safe to get drunk there at the place we were staying. But like that was a point in my alcoholism. I was a full-blown alcoholic, but I could still control things.
So, and like, those are my experiences. I kept being like, Sarah's not an alcoholic. I'm like, yeah, maybe she should drink less. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when I saw your progression and I saw the change, I was like, oh, she was.
Yeah.
You just masked it so well.
So well.
Yeah.
I masked it really well. And it's so funny that I had this like strong line of like, when I had kids, I wasn't going to drink. At the end, it changed. So I don't know if you remember, but there was one time I was like, well, I mean, we could go away for a mom's weekend and I could still have margaritas. Like, I just won't drink in front of them. And I remember that like all of this happened in a pretty short time. The friendship thing, my change of boundary around drinking with a family, like all of it was like pretty quick that I was going downhill fast. And in that, one, I was not dating people I should have children with, nor was I behaving in a way that I was fostering a family. You know, for me, it's always been a value to have a family, but I turned my back on that desire, that dream, more of a dream than a value. Like it was something that I just always wanted in my life. And I turned my back on that so I could drink, so that I could behave the way I did. And for me, my other drugs, so I wasn't big into drugs because I was worried about being out of control, which to me today is really ironic. I think that, I tried some things sometimes and I didn't like them. I didn't like the way I felt. And so alcohol was a drug that I enjoyed. But my second drug of choice was men. Like I found that when I got drunk, I could get attention and it was a false sense of worth of who I could attract. And that sounds so shallow saying this. Like, I'm not going to cover that up in any way, but it became almost a game at the end of like, okay, I'm going to get drunk and I'm going to spot the person who I think is the best looking here. And if I can find out that they like me or they want to go home with me, then I have like achieved some like high and mighty status. No,
Badge.
yeah, that's the delusion, though, I think, of being in the depths of addiction, and whether that is addiction to money, food, men, alcohol, drugs. Like, I think that when you are in that depth, your perception of what brings worth or what brings reality is so skewed. Like, your perception of reality is so skewed. Like, does it stem from because in high school, like, no boy liked me? Probably. Like, but like, that's the dumbest thing ever. Like, who am I showing? Also, I will note that out of high school, I've learned that lots of boys liked me. We were just all quiet and shy and awkward. But like, I had this perception that I was unlovable or that I wasn't attractive or that like we'll call it what it was. I felt unattractive and unlovable. And so alcohol then gave me the confidence to be around men who would tell me I was attractive and lovable. And that combination, oh, it was sweet. But it wasn't. Like, it was empty. It was sweet until it wasn't. The relationships were vacant. They weren't based on values or interest or anything. They were based on getting drunk. And that doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Or I would say the relationships that weren't based on getting drunk, like there's only so much to access of me at that point.
Yeah.
This is a fun conversation.
Yeah, it is. I'm really enjoying it. I'm like trying to think of other questions I have to ask you about. But we've talked a lot about, we've talked about this even like more recently. I have my dinosaur games, you have your TV, but like I do think that there's something to be said about still having, we do live in a chaotic world. And I know I still kind of always struggle with, sometimes I do just want to zone out. I do just want to like chill out. So what do you do? I mean, it used to be alcohol and vacant relationships, but now you have a loving relationship and family. And like, oh my God, what do you do?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that human nature is to have escape at some point. The world we live in and the world that has always existed. So I'm kind of coming to terms with it right now. Like, sometimes I'm like, oh, we're in like such a hard place in our society and the world. Like, we've always been in a hard place in society and world, like always. It's both comforting and really depressing, depending how you look at it. I think checking out isn't the bad thing. I think it's, how are you checking out? How long? How is it impacting you or your relationships? So for me, like I always say, I'm going to let this air, but I've never woken up with a stranger because I ate a pint of Ben and Jerry's. Like, it's never happened. Like, I have known what I did the night before. I might be bloated. I might not feel well, but I've never done anything. My clothes have stayed on in public. I haven't peed on a sidewalk in Boston while people are walking by. Like, there is no consequence that has happened because I ate a pint of ice cream other than some not feeling well. So for me, it's very similar to the trauma journey of what coping mechanisms am I okay with? What survival mechanisms am I okay with? Like, I always used an example of getting up in the middle of the night to make sure a door is locked. To me, is more comforting than trying to convince myself I don't need to see if that door is locked. Like, a coping strategy for me in trauma was to do certain things to feel safer, right? Like, every chapter is different. I would say it's the same in recovery. Is how is this impacting my relationship to self, people in my life, and God? And if it's coming between one of those things in a way that is harmful, then I need to look at it. And sometimes my binge TV watching is harmful to me. But on the scale of events, I'm okay with some of my checkout today. And I think that's what it has to be for everyone. Just like there are so many paths of recovery, which I have come to learn about. I am here because of a spiritual path and 12-step paths and therapy and spirituality and relationships. Like there's no one thing that brought me to 13 years of sobriety. There's just not. And there are a lot of people that have different ways of what works for them. And I think it's the same with checking out, like what works for you in a way that is healthy enough. We spend too much time trying to like perfect things or, do it right. Like, no, I'm just going to watch some reality TV and it's trashy and I might feel bad after it. But in that moment, it worked.
I think there's a lot more support for people that are sober curious, but what would your advice be for people that are thinking it might be time?
I think if you're thinking about it, there's a reason. I think that's just the answer. Like whenever there's that moment of like, should I not drink anymore? Or should I not eat dairy anymore? Like there's a reason. So to me, it's looking at what is that reason and looking at why is this so complicated? Because alcohol is a beverage. So, right, I have a cup of tea in front of me right now. And if you told me I couldn't have tea for the rest of my life, I would be sad, but I wouldn't question my morality or judgment, like what people would think. There would be no questioning other than why the fuck can't I have tea anymore? But like, we don't do this to ourselves on other things, is I guess the point, like there is this moral question that comes into play of, am I right or am I wrong? Am I good or am I bad? And I think we need to take that out of the alcohol conversation because alcohol isn't about being good or bad. Alcohol is a substance that has a different reaction in people's bodies. And if you are on the fence and you're curious to what it could be like with a life without, I would ask why. I think that being sober curious is an opening to do work on your inside, right? Like taking away alcohol does not solve anyone's problems completely, right? It is when you take away the alcohol, it is this like confrontation of stuff you've been hiding from or that you have pushed down or that you're so disconnected from. And so taking that away and doing that work on yourself, some people find that brings such joy and contentment and healing that they want to continue it. And others feel that like, oh, alcohol wasn't the issue and I'm going to keep drinking and do this work. Then some people just go back to drinking, don't do work and have another issue next January. But it's all good. Like, I guess that's why it's so hard to talk about without sounding like there is a piece of what I think people should do, because I have had such a great life removing alcohol that for me to even test the waters of putting alcohol back. So like you said in the beginning, you were always like, why don't you just cut back in drinking? And you said that to me. You were like, I don't think you're an alcoholic. Like, I think like, yeah, you have some issues, but like, you don't have those issues. Like, it wasn't quite something like that, but
I mean, it was that conversation I remember. It was pretty much, I was like, but why?
what's going on? And to me, it's not worth even testing the waters. Like, it's not worth being like, oh, well, I would have a glass of champagne so I can have that and give up everything that I've been gifted with on my path of sobriety. And that is not to say sober life has been easy life, but it has been worth it.
Anything you wish I asked you that we talked about or didn't talk about?
I think would I choose the same path? Like, if I know everything I know now, at 18, would I have picked up that first drink? And the answer to me is yes, because it brought me to the solution that I needed. It brought me to a layer of healing that I don't know if I would have ever uncovered. So to me, I was fearful of alcohol before I ever ingested alcohol because there's so much addiction in my family history. And I just figured like it's going to be a problem. So I lived in fear. And what I would say today, I think what I would want people to know that are curious, that are like, huh? Like, what do you do then? Is that my life is so abundantly full because of not having alcohol in a way that I think if I had never picked up, I would not have today. And if I had never stopped, I wouldn't have today. There's a saying in some recovery circles that my worst day sober is still better than my best day drinking. Not accurate in my life. Like, no, like I have had some fucking hard days sober, like painful, excruciating, hard days. And I had some really fun days drinking. And what I know today is I would not exchange that hardest day for the best day. I like that they have both existed. And that today my life is freedom. And it goes back to what we said at the beginning. Alcohol gave freedom, but today my life's freedom because I'm not reliant on a substance to give me that feeling. I can channel my own feelings. I can channel my own breath work. I can channel my own calm. I can pick up my own coping mechanisms. And I can experience the joy, the serenity, the excitement that life has to offer in a way that is, when I drank, my feelings were like this. And today my feelings still go like up and down, but they're manageable and they're true and they're worth it. They're worth it.
Thank you for sharing. This was a really nice conversation.